Good afternoon and welcome to the last in our series of interviews with parliamentary candidates standing in both of Warrington's constituencies. Today we're joined by David Crowther, who's standing for the Lib Dems in Warrington North. David, welcome and good afternoon. Just to start well into the election campaign now, how is everything going so far?
I think it's going as well as could be expected. I think what I'm finding as I'm talking to people is there's an awful lot of undecided. There's an awful lot of people not prepared to say how they're going to vote. I think because they're constantly reading amount of hassle and keeping the cards close to the chest. The ones that are prepared to say are by and large indicated that they're prepared to vote Liberal Democrat.
And it wasn't a great result for the Lib Dems in Warrington North in 2017, but I mean, if we look back to 2010, they did quite well. What would be deemed a successful result on December the 12th?
Well, in 2010, we got 20%. I would hope, certainly, to get somewhere towards that. I mean, there's a constant comments which say, only Labour, only Conservatives. In 2010, we started to get quite close to the Conservative vote. And if people really want to get the Conservatives out, I really don't see any fear of them winning, and they should lend us their vote.
Much has been said about the Lib Dems' controversial revoke policy. Are you fully behind that policy?
If we were to gain a majority in Parliament, then clearly that's the case. It would be unreasonable for us to stand on the basis of wanting to get out or wanting to revoke, and then somehow go back to people and say, whatever. But to be realistic about it, I think the people's vote is a far more sensible way forward with the situation we're in. And yet I actually think that if we can prevent the Conservatives from getting enough seats and can have a people's vote, I think we can then have a very considerable input as to what's going to happen.
And of course, many people in Warrington North voted to leave back in 2016 in the EU referendum. Do you acknowledge the anger from those who did back leave that the UK still remains in the European Union more than 3 years on?
I accept that lots of people are annoyed about lots of things. At times, I'm not quite sure why some people are so frustrated when it was never clear what actually they were voting for. I think if you took a cross-section of 20 people, there would be probably 10 different views about what made them vote whichever way they voted. I certainly acknowledge that they're annoyed. I think the problem is that parliamentarians are elected to represent all their constituents. In Warrington, for instance, it is true that Leave got more votes than Remain. But it was something like 28% of the people didn't vote at all. Add them to the people who voted Remain, and 60%. So can you truly just leave on the basis, we said leave, let's leave and let's not worry about the impact? I think if you're truly going to leave, if people truly believe that we should leave, a people's vote comes up with truly saying that they want to leave, I think it needs to be very clear what actually is going to happen once we have left.
And many other issues facing residents in Warrington North as well, particularly Peel Hall, uncertainty over the future of that site. Do you believe that site needs to be protected from any development?
I think the idea of what the developers putting forward to Peel Hall is absolutely ridiculous. I think people realise who actually live here that Warrington is in the divide of the number of motorways. There is a limited amount of space. Do we really want to actually just build more roads? Because that in effect would have to happen. To build Peel Hall would have to be roads, more green belt. Once you add on what's likely to happen with Parkside, what's happening in Burton Wood, etc., all you're really doing is building a bottleneck that people would find no one's going to buy those properties, and purely as a principle, the idea of building on Greenbelt or areas such as Peel Hall, we shouldn't even be considering them.
and calls for a new hospital, forming part of the campaign for candidates across both of Warrington's constituencies. If elected, would you be campaigning for a new hospital for the town?
Absolutely vital, absolutely vital. I mean, although I've not lived in Warrington for a long time, the fact is that I lived in Newton Willows, and the Warrington Hospital is the hospital. So call an ambulance out in Newton, it fetches you to Warrington Hospital. So I've experienced Warrington Hospital on numerous occasions. My mother spent, unfortunately, quite a lot of time in Warrington Hospital, and it is clear. I was a month ago. It is clear that despite the amazingly hard work done by all the medical staff and everyone else there, the building itself is no longer fit for purpose. And my only proviso is that the right site needs to be found, because just transferring it from one traffic bottleneck to another one may not necessarily be the solution. But yes, new hospital, absolutely vital.
And many politicians getting sick and tired of Brexit simply dominating everything, residents as well. Is that something you're just getting completely frustrated and sick and tired of now, Brexit dominating life day in, day out?
The situation we've got ourselves in is if the electorate don't vote for the Liberal Democrats and we don't revoke, then Brexit is not going to go away for the next 10 years. And it's all right, Boris saying, vote for me, 31st of January we'll be out and it'll be all over. Actually, no, the end of part one, but there's an awful long way ahead of all the negotiations for deals, etc. But I can understand why people, you can't switch the television on now without hearing of Brexit. The news every day starts with Brexit. Even when they've got nothing to say, they still say something about Brexit. So I can fully understand why people say, I just want it over and done with. I hope they realise that both the Conservative view and Corbyn's Brexit 2 will still result in Brexit being on the headlines for the next good number of years.
Let's move away from Brexit for a second. Onto social media. Many politicians have faced high levels of abuse through social media. Is that something that you've experienced in recent months or years?
Fortunately not. I try to work on the basis of being constructive, not attacking people, more bringing other pieces of information to their attention rather than say, hey, you're wrong. Because people are entitled to their views. Or say, I would just offer alternative facts for them and then they'll have to make their own mind up. And by doing it that way, it tends to be that I don't necessarily attract some of the more vicious responses.
I think if you are elected on December the 12th, it could be one of the biggest shocks in election history. But if you aren't elected, would that be the end of the road for your ambitions to become a Member of Parliament?
I actually think to be an MP, you need to have certain attributes, and one of them certainly is staying power, energy, etc. If we go for, if there's another election next March, then I would intend to stand again. If in fact after the election it runs the full 5 years, then no, I wouldn't be putting my name forward, because I don't believe that at that time I'll be 72. I don't believe that you can necessarily put the amount of energy and effort into doing at that age.
And just away from politics, what do you sort of do to try and take your mind off the likes of Brexit?
I have a small four-legged little white animal I call my dog that actually dictates my life. It's an 8 o'clock morning start most days because he wants to walk. I want to walk at 10, I want to walk during the middle of the day, and I find it absolutely amazingly therapeutic that actually you take the dog for a walk, you allow your mind to clear, and very often the number of speeches or things that come clear having walked the dog are amazing. Even though I'm supposed to be relaxing, it doesn't actually seem to work that way. But yes, my little dog is the answer to your question.
Thanks for your time today.